Okay, so this is our broadcast of our speeches, and we're missing two people, Fallon and Beth Hansen, because Fallon already gave her speech on Thursday, and Beth didn't have the right equipment with her to do it today, so she's going to post it and let us all watch her video and review it later. So, who's going to go first?
Okay, my name is Susan Lufau. I am a student at BYU, Idaho, and I work at a high school with students who have been identified as at risk of dropping out. Some of these students have learning disabilities, some have emotional disturbances, and some lack the motivation to just simply succeed. This year we had 2 pregnant girls, 1 expectant father, 1 who got caught up in drugs, 1 whose parents just leave him alone for weeks at a time because they've got plenty of money and very important jobs that take them jet-setting all over the world. And since he's clearly able to take care of himself, they just leave him with money, a fully stocked refrigerator, and a maid who comes by once a week to clean up after him. And on a more personal note, my own 18-year-old nephew tried to commit suicide last month. What do all these teenagers have in common? They all suffer from the most common form of child mistreatment called neglect. Child neglect is a form of abuse in which the caregiver fails to provide for the child in some way that could result in physical, emotional, psychological, or even educational harm. When most people consider a mistreatment of a child, they think of active abuse. The caregiver, they're hurting them or possibly molesting the child. But neglect is basically passive abuse. Neglect accounts for about 78% of child mistreatment in the United States. Over 2,200 children in the U.S. die of abuse and neglect died of neglect and abuse in 2012, and nearly 70% of those died because of neglect. Those who survive experience many psychological issues over time, from attention and language deficits to reduced mental function to lower academic performance. Out of all the neglect, the most common is physical neglect, which is when a caregiver fails to provide for the basic physical needs such as food, shelter, clothing, even sanitary living conditions. Other forms include a child not letting a child attend school or obtain medical care. One of the most often overlooked forms of neglect is psychological or emotional neglect. This is much harder to track because it's hard to see and it has long-lasting effects. This would look like humiliation, insults to the child, showing a lack of attention, ignoring the child, or simply isolating them from friends or family. I mean, we've all seen it, even simple forms of it, like at the park where the kids are playing and wanting the parents to play or watch them or something, and the parents are just sitting on their phones. Consequences of child neglect are so far-reaching. Repeated abuse is associated with the central nervous system damage. It can actually affect their brains. Over time, the massive trauma of persistent abuse seems to blunt the children's normal psychological response to stress. These effects increase the chances of cognitive and emotional problems that endure throughout the life of the child. These problems reach everybody. They start at the microsystem of the ecological structure, but extend out into the mesosystem and the exosystem. As of 2012, over 700,000 teenage girls, about 12,000 of them under age 15, get pregnant each year. The 2 pregnant girls at my school are classic examples of not getting the emotional and physical attention they needed from their parents. Countless dollars are spent each year to fix all the damage caused by neglecting our children. Most laws and policies in effect now are geared toward treating the symptoms of neglect. For example, in 18 states, if you witness or suspect neglect, you're required to report it, no matter what your profession. But this is only after the neglect has taken place and there's damage already incurred. In 2012, a bill was introduced called the National Parent Helpline Act. It was intended to assist our nation's parents and caregivers with issues related to parenting and positive discipline techniques, effective communication strategies, stress reduction, and personal care and safety. providing parents and caregivers with tools and information that would lessen the incidence of child abuse and neglect, and thus the incidence of juvenile delinquency. Every call to the National Parent Helpline would be answered by a trained helpline advocate who provides various supports and assistance to parents and caregivers and can give information on help in their own based on their own community, so they can get help right to their homes. Unfortunately, the bill died in Congress, but we don't have to let it stop there. Special education across the country has in-home programs for one-on-one training with individual families. We need to bring something like that out to the general public. But we can and should keep working on a way to bring education to the family level. We need to find a way to teach parents how to build and encourage their children so that they don't end up crying out for attention by getting pregnant, turning to drugs, or attempting suicide. Thank you. I don't even know how long that was.
Sorry, I'm muting the microphone. So I forgot to start the timer until after you
Okay.
already started. But I'm pretty sure it was over 5 minutes. Because, yeah, I timed you for 4 minutes, but that was after, like, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I
know I was talking really fast, too. Anyway.
No. So my question for you is, what role do you think technology plays in neglect in our society?
Oh my gosh, there's a thing called phubbing. Have you heard of it? It's in the Urban Dictionary. I looked it up. It's when people snub other people by staying on their phones. You know, I've seen people out on dates, and each one of them is just sitting on their phone. You could be completely sitting there with somebody and completely absorbed in your cell phone. It happens. I see it happen all the time with little kids, parents just so absorbed in their phones playing games or checking Facebook or whatever, and they're just completely ignoring their kids. I think that's a huge one, and they have a name for it, phubbing.
Yeah, that's what it's like.
Yeah, Phubbing.
I'm writing it down. That's so sad. Let me think. How do you think? What do you think is the best way to help parents learn things that will help them to prevent neglect of their children in our society?
I think it's yeah, I think it's teaching. I think if the schools had some programs that went directly to the parents, like I work in special education, so I know that they have programs for those parents all the time, and I think that if we had some more programs offered for just the regular general population, these parents can get some more information that could be really helpful to them about just basic parenting skills, and I think that's what we need, is to get it straight into the homes, straight to the parents.
That's awesome. You sounded great, by the way. I was like super enthralled.
Oh yeah, me too.
Oh my gosh. I've never heard those statistics. My husband's a social worker, and so he is, sorry, I hope you can't hear my screen. But he works with people all the time who have like neglect and abuse situations, and I didn't realize how prevalent it was. But it's, for him, he says that it's drugs. Drugs are what makes people neglect their children. Especially here in Idaho, we have a big problem with meth, and so that's why people neglect their kids, is because they're so caught up in their drugs. That's just
we have a lot of that. It's very sad.
It's the small town America drug. It's so hot, and it's completely addicting. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So sad.
Interesting topic. Yeah, it seems like there's situations where neglect is just likely, like, you know, strapped single mothers that are so busy, and like when they have that family situation, it's hard to prevent neglect, you know, like, I don't know.
Yes, there's drugs, there's parents who are so busy and stressed out that they can't, it's hard for them to deal with what's going on at home because they're so worried about how to pay the bills or something. And then there's also just people who are so self-absorbed that, they just think about themselves and put themselves before the needs of their children, emotional needs of their children. They feel like they're taking care of them because they're providing all the physical things, but emotionally they're not giving that attention that they need, so the kids turn somewhere else.
I think that goes along perfectly with my talk, because I'm talking about feminism, and one of the big movements in feminism is mothers working outside the home while fathers work outside the home, so they basically just drop their kids off at daycare and let daycare raise them. 1 minute, let me go see if my husband can kill me. So you don't have to.
And I'll get the timer ready so don't forget.
Okay, sorry.
Riley, what's your email?
Riley Farrens, or the one for this one? Yeah, I think it's RYAFARRENS @gmail.com. And what was yours, Susan?
It's SUSANLIUF, like Frank, AU, 8, the number 8, @gmail.com.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so are we ready for mine now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I might get a little distracted. My baby is screaming in the other room.
It'll be an object lesson about mothering. I don't know.
Okay. Actually, as I wrote this speech, my beautiful 8-month-old daughter, she was laying in front of me napping, and I could see her little arms were folded across her chest, and her chest was rising and falling with each breath, and it was just so peaceful and so beautiful to watch. Sleeping babies are one of my favorite things. She's the most wonderful blessing I've ever received, and becoming a mother has taught me a lot of valuable things about life. I've stayed up into the wee hours of the morning caring for a life that I created, and I've learned about the values. Even if I may go so far, I know it's not politically correct to say, but the necessity of a father in her life to interact with. For me, and luckily for my children as well, we have a secure base. Our family is our secure base from which we can explore. And our children have a secure base in the knowledge that we love them and we're going to continue to love them. I say this not to say that my home or family is perfect, because heaven knows we have a lot of room to improve, but instead to point out the antithesis to the ideals of a pernicious force in our world, and that is radical feminism. And it has declared a war on family. I'm not speaking figuratively, and I am not understating when I say that they declare fervently that the nuclear family is archaic and outdated. And Julia Annis, a prominent feminist of old, even said that those who support it are comparable to Nazi Germany. They do not mince words when they say that the nuclear family should not be the institution that we use as the basis of our society. They literally say that it is outdated that we use the term building block of society when referring to the family. Their warpath has already started. They've been behind many movements such as no-fault divorce, which was a movement in the 70s. It was legislation that made it possible for anybody to get a divorce for any reason. If you just fell out of love, you could get a divorce instead of having to base it on a fault of someone else. For example, abuse, neglect, or any other reason there is to really get divorced. So it started with those little seeds that are planted to get rid of the family and to ruin the family. According to a study by Nakanenzi, no-fault divorce continued to increase the divorce rate since it was begun between the 1970 and 1980, and that leaves more children scarred in the aftermath of divorce. They were behind the case in the Supreme Court known as Roe versus Wade, which is very well known for its providing of abortion rights for mothers and for anybody really, up to the second trimester. They allow the murder of millions of unborn children each year through Roe versus Wade, and they continue to fight for androgenizing gender as well, even as more and more research comes to light that the genders are fundamentally different. And this is a fight which means that our children have to question even the most basic and fundamental parts of their identity, which, as you can imagine, is just scarring for young children who don't yet understand who they are. They have to question even the things that their parents say because our culture is so pervasive with, it's so ingrained with radicalism and its ideology. And that's just a side effect of their ideas, and they haven't directly legislated. Oh, I'm so sorry. The real fear we should have about radical feminism's influence on our society is the repercussions for our children. The first major repercussion is that women are having less children. The current birth rate, which has been steady for 3 years in a row, is 13 out of every 1,000 people are having a child. As you can imagine, this means that our population cannot sustain itself without the influx of people coming into the country from other places. We literally cannot sustain our population, which hurts our economy, which hurts our children, and it's so rough for me to see because they're not important enough for people to be having children. With rates like these, we're not able to sustain our population without immigration, and this is a national crisis, but more importantly, it shows how the trend toward feminist thought has had an effect on the amount of children that are being born. Children are seen as a burden, just to be dropped off at daycare centers while mom does more important things like Susan was talking about. Parents are neglecting their children because they have more important things to do. What does this teach them about themselves, and how will they turn out? And what will our society look like when we have a generation of children who are raised by mothers who just don't care? This is merely a side effect of their ideas, and it's not something they directly legislated. What will the world look like when those things I outlined earlier are come to fruition? They're malevolent, to say the least, in their disregard for children. So they hide behind what they term rights for children, as they have done in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children. This trend does not have to continue. You and I both can unite against radical feminism and save our children and our families from their attack. To fight, there are 3 things that I think that we should do. Each one of us, every person in the world can do this. And the first is simply to be an example. You have the time and you have the means to promote the nuclear family by simply living in yours and being an example to others and showing how beneficial it is to you and to your community and to society as a whole. Show them that your children are not a burden and that you love them. Second, we need to be active in our political sphere. Vote for the candidates that you know will support the family. Our school boards, community, state, and national leaders should receive votes only if they support and sustain the family as the fundamental unit of society. And thirdly, we should be active in our advocacy for the nuclear family. We should be speaking to those who have the power to create and change the law about what is important to us, because our voices can make a difference. My daughter is counting on us to win this war for her. She needs us to support those necessary measures designed to maintain and strengthen the family as the fundamental unit of society, or who knows what her world will look like. Thank you.
Awesome.
That was good. That was over 6 minutes, so.
No, well, I fluffed it and I was freaking out. That's why I kept stumbling, because I was like, oh crap, I added things. Where did I go?
Yeah, I'm kind of worried mine's going to be kind of long. We'll see.
That was really good, Riley. You're so passionate about the topic. You can definitely see that. I do have a question.
Yeah.
What do you propose? How can we teach young girls to value motherhood?
I think the only way that we can really teach our children and girls in general is to be an example to them of what motherhood should look like. I feel like if we treat our children with love and care, and other people see that, and we invite other people's children into our homes to see that, I think that's going to be the only way, because we can't really go out and teach anymore, because that ideology is so pernicious. It's so it's everywhere in our society, just that feminism is the only way and the right way. So we have to bring it into our homes. We have to be examples for the children and for our children's friends. Let them see what it's like, and they'll want to follow. They'll want a nuclear family if they see what it looks like to have one.
Awesome.
I'll ask, how do you see that men in our society are affected by radical feminism?
I think it's twofold. I think about half the men that I know call themselves feminists, and they embrace feminism because they see it as a cultural trend. Even though radical feminists are man-haters, they hate men. I didn't get any research on that, but in articles I've read, and in the Sacred Duty, you can see they just have a hatred for men because they believe the patriarchy is pernicious. I keep using that word, but they just believe that patriarchy is bad. So I feel like half the men in our world are just supporting it because it's popular, and then half of them are being victimized almost by feminism. They don't see it as good, and so people attack them for it. If you are a man and a supporter of the family, like Brother Rarick, when he goes to the UN and talks about fatherhood or the family, he is booed and hissed at and attacked, and it's because they don't think that he has anything to say because he is not a woman, so he doesn't understand, and he will never understand, and so they become victims of radical feminism instead of supporters of it.
Hmm.
I could talk about this for about 3 hours.
Well, that's good. That's what you need.
So,
Very
if you ever
good.
have any questions, I have about 1 million into so. Okay.
Should we move on to my?
Now, Heather, do you want me to time you?
Sure. I'm hoping it's not too long. I really hope. Okay.
And what's your email?
My email is Heather, all lowercase, HEATHER, F 25252 @gmail.com.
How many 2 5s?
So 25252.
2525-2.
At
Yeah.
Gmail? Okay. Okay.
All right. Okay. So mine is on the risks of liberal sex education in society. Sorry, computer's falling apart. Okay. As a college student who chooses to follow the practice of complete abstinence before marriage, I stand with the minority when compared to most college-age single young adults across the U.S. The reasons for this personal decision are most strongly based on personal moral values and religious beliefs that are important to me. But I also believe strongly that I'm making an investment for the future relationships I will have, as well as my own physical and emotional health. It brings me comfort to feel that the self-control I'm working on now will help me to be faithful to a future spouse and enjoy happier marriage and family life. And I feel completely free from the worry about getting pregnant while unable to care for a baby in the way I'd like to. These things help me to have peace and are the way that I choose to live my life. Not everyone in America shares my own beliefs or values, and yet it is the expression of these morals and beliefs and the freedom to preserve them that are fundamental to the success of our society as Americans. Over the past decade or so, many American state legislators have given more and more attention to proposals for a comprehensive sex education program, as opposed to an abstinence-only based program in elementary, middle, high schools, and college campuses. The need for new policies regarding sex education is evident from the trends in teenage sexual promiscuity and the rise of STDs. As of research in 2013, 47% of teens had ever had sexual intercourse. Families typically struggle financially when a young mother has to care for a child born out of wedlock without support. In 2013, the U.S. government spent $943 billion on programs to help people who have low income, and most of these families served by these programs are single-parent families. Sexually transmitted diseases such as gonorrhea and syphilis have been rising rampantly, causing heartache for thousands of young people. For example, the rate of babies born with syphilis rose 38% just in the year 2014. Babies with this disease struggle with a range of symptoms from a severe rash to blindness or even death. So it is clear that public action must be taken to help young people make better decisions about sex, because we as a society benefit by having more youth who avoid risky sexual and promiscuous behavior. The comprehensive sex education programs promise to address this need through informing young people thoroughly so they can make better decisions. But are these programs really just offering useful information? Dr. Miriam Grossman, a campus psychiatrist at UCLA, undertook her own research of comprehensive sex education websites after wondering about the lack of what she called actual medical understanding of sex that she observed in the college co-eds she worked with. She reported that, instead of accurate treatment of such issues as condom effectiveness and the high health risk of particular sexual practices, the websites are replete with exhortations to adolescents to explore their sexuality. In other words, they've promoted ideology rather than information. The ideologies that are pushed and promoted in these programs are about freedom to use sex for pleasure and acceptance of various types of sexual practices and sexual orientation. Through these programs, youth spend time learning different ways to have sex in descriptive detail. The proponents of a more liberal sex education claim that the other types of programs are unrealistic and outdated. Diane Schneider, a representative of the NEA, which is the largest U.S. teachers association, proclaimed that comprehensive sex education is, in her words, the only way to combat heterosexism and gender conformity. She continued to express the need for inclusive sex education in U.S. schools with curriculum based on a liberal hetero and homosexual expression. She claimed that the idea of sex education remains an oxymoron if it is abstinence-based, or if students are still able to opt out. Not everyone shares the beliefs and agenda of Ms. Schneider, but the comprehensive sex education programs teach these beliefs as a fact to all young people, no matter what their personal family's values are. And yet the ideology of abstaining from sex until marriage is looked upon as offensive and completely unrealistic. Because of data that shows facts such as that 10,000 young people between ages 13 and 24 were diagnosed with the HIV virus in 2013, we need to look for ways to prevent STDs as much as possible. A study in 2000 indicates the estimated direct medical costs for treating young people with sexually transmitted infections was $6.5 billion annually, excluding costs associated with HIV and AIDS. Abstinence has always been the best prevention. For young people who choose to abstain from having sex before marriage, the largest percentage reported that moral and religious beliefs were their primary reason for doing so. This freedom to practice moral and religious beliefs is an enormous factor in lessening the epidemic of STDs. The push for more liberality in sex education programs restricts citizens who desire to be more conservative about sex from helping their children learn moral values they feel will prepare them for a happy family life. In March of 2015, a federal bill was introduced called the Real Education for Healthy Youth Act, which would prevent abstinence-only based programs from receiving any government funding and require all sex education programs to address LGBT youth in their programs. Some states have been pushing for adoption of this type of program as mandatory in schools, and only 35 states allow parents to opt out of the sex education program at school due to personal beliefs. Because sexuality is such a personal and large concern, families need to be able to teach their children principles and morals about sexuality that they feel safe with. These principles and morals should not be determined by the government, the school, or the activist groups that advocate for these programs. Those who believe that sex is something that requires great responsibility and commitment and is not just a normal pastime expression must take serious consideration of the policies that are being pushed in our society. We need to promote sexual education programs that teach facts and information without encouraging youth to experiment with sex freely and without promoting specific ideologies. Without the strong morals taught through religions and careful parents, we can count on no decrease in the amount of heartache from risky adolescent behavior. Sorry.
Awesome. Riley, you're muted.
Oh.
6 minutes, 51 seconds.
Yay!
Nice.
Oh my gosh. I was trying to speak fast because I thought it was so long.
No, that was awesome. I'm so proud of everyone. Everyone's talks have been great speeches.
Yeah.
Hey, so My question for you comes from one of my friends who is very liberal, and we've talked about this subject before, but she says, what about those kids who don't have parents who will teach them about sex, who are the most likely to engage in sexual behavior? Why shouldn't we teach them about sex when their parents won't?
Well, I think they should be taught. They need education that's informative as far as like biology and the risks and things like that, but I think that teachers have a responsibility to teach, what is most valuable, that avoiding risk is most valuable to children, and preventing it, and to provide education um, that expresses what will best lead to them avoiding these behaviors. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great answer.
And that was the same question I was going to ask, so now I'm trying to think of something else. Trying to think of something else. Do you feel like at the high school level, like the kids that I was talking about, like what Riley suggested, that are not getting educated at home, the parents are not educating them at home, and they're very high risk of engaging in sexual activity, what do you think that they should still be teaching absolute abstinence, or do you think that they should go on and have some other type of teaching about safe sex, or what, something a little bit further, knowing that these kids are not going to choose abstinence?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big concern that a lot of the articles I read express, like, they're going to do it anyways. We might as well just, describe everything, and instead of trying to get them to stop it because they can't, teach them other things they can do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's important that the ideologies that are expressed in the sex education programs reflect more of what society at large believes in, which not everyone, I think most people believe that it's best if children wait to have sex until they're at least adults.
Mm-hmm.
And some people believe that they should be married, like in our religion. So I think I think it's important that there are some sort of morals and restraints included more in these programs that expresses more of what society believes, because right now they're saying, it's normal, here's how you can masturbate, here's how you can do this kind of sex, like, go try it.
Mm-hmm.
It's good for everyone. I don't know. So.
No, it's totally true.
Okay.
In Massachusetts right now, they have a comprehensive sex education program that is there's no way to opt out. If you don't take it, you can't graduate. And they teach kindergartens that they start teaching sexual education, and some of the curriculum is masturbation, homosexuality, teaching them that it's okay to explore their sexuality without consent from their parents, that they'll give them birth control without consent of their parents, they can get abortions without consent of their parents, things like that. I don't know if those are legislated yet, but I know that they're being fought for. I know that the sex education teaches about masturbation and homosexuality, and I know that it starts in kindergarten, but
oh my gosh.
the birth control and abortion, that's something that's happening in Washington right now. It's all feminism, guys. It's all just feminism. Yeah. But it's being fought for right now in Washington, and not Washington, D.C. even, Washington State. They want children to be able to have birth control and abortions on demand without parents' knowledge. Isn't that scary?
But I think if you looked at professionals, people that research the psychology of adolescents and children, it doesn't make sense why teachers would want, knowing how adolescents' brains work and stuff, it doesn't make sense why they would be like, go, free.
Yeah, exactly. They don't understand long-term consequences enough yet to make those kinds of decisions, and that just is so scary to me.
Yeah.
You know that child rights thing that we were studying about that's
Mhm.
being proposed at the UN? That was one of the things on there. Did you guys ever have a chance to click on those 20 statements or?
It came
I pulled them up
briefly.
for my
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah, yeah, that's some scary stuff. And if that document gets ratified, that's going to override everything, all the laws that we already have here in place. So they would be able to go get abortions without any parental consent.
And that's available in, like, I think there's only 2 countries that don't have that, and we're one of them.
Right.
And just like they talked about in A Sacred Duty, when international laws, when the UN has been ratified in other countries, it affects legislation in the United States. Scary.
Yep, scary stuff. All right, good job. Very
Yeah,
good.
thanks.
Yeah, good job,
Um,
everyone.
Riley, do you know if they posted Fallon's speech on the discussion board, or how do we see that?
I